Hello, my name is Brian Hyman. Welcome to the Flightline Fabrications Living History Project. Today from Hillsboro, Oregon, we're very excited to have World War II Holocaust survivor and published author Alter Wiener. Alter, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
The reason that I wrote that book, since you mentioned it, I went to a church the other day, and when I finished my presentation, an older gentleman approached me with tears in his eyes, and he told me, I was an officer in the American Army in 1945. I was one of the liberators of Buchenwald, which is a very infamous camp in Germany. And I would like you to promise me in front of the church that you are going to put in print your life story, what I heard this morning. Do it for my children and for my grandchildren. And I was very moved. I promised him, and I did try my best because I never had a chance to study the English language. And I wrote my autobiography, and it was published last April. I have no intent to make money on it. I just did it as an obligation, a moral obligation. And my life story, to be very brief, I was born in Poland in a little town called Chrzanów, close to the German border. As a little kid, I had a pretty good life. I went to a public school in the morning and the religious school in the afternoon. I had beautiful values instilled in me as a child, which the older I get, the more appreciative I am. And then all this came to an end. The good life, and I say good life according to the standard of living in those days. We didn't have anything that you see here, not a refrigerator or whatever, anything. We didn't have those things. Television, cars, didn't exist. But what we did have is beautiful family life. And all this came to an end on September 1 or September 1st when the German army invaded Poland. And since my little town, Chrzanów, is very close to the German border, we were advised to flee. How do you flee? People had no cars, so people walked away. They took a few belongings and they walked, hoping that somehow Germany is not going to take over the entire country from Poland. And those who could afford, they hired a coachman with a horse-drawn wagon. So in my case, we did try to flee, but my father couldn't join us because the Polish retreating army asked him to stay because they needed the groceries that he had in his business. But my stepmother, my older brother, myself, my younger brother, did manage to get away about 40 miles. And when we arrived at that location, which was called Dąbrowa, the Germans were there already. So we didn't accomplish anything by trying to flee. You see, the Polish army was no match to the mighty German forces. Anyway, we were stuck for 3 months. When we got back home, we couldn't find our father, and later on they came to us from the Judenrat, which was a committee, and they told us, we know that Mr. Wiener is missing, but if you would like to know whether your husband is one of those victims, then we are going to exhume a pit at the outskirts of our city. So the following morning, my stepmother, my older brother, and myself went to that location. People volunteered to dig out those bodies. And it was very difficult to identify because the bodies were partially decomposed. But after many hours, my stepmother did manage to recognize my father's body by the certain items that he had in his clothing. Obviously, this was a very traumatic experience in my life. I call it the turning point of my life because at such a tender age, the age of 13, seeing your partially decomposed face of your father is something that gives me nightmares till this very day. And it's very tough. The Germans embittered our life. I couldn't go to school. Then they took my older brother away. 1 year later, they took me away to camps. I was altogether in 5 different camps. In my last camp, which was a concentration camp called Waldenburg, they stripped me naked and they gave me a uniform. They took away everything from me what I had from home. I don't even have a birth certificate like any other person in modern times. I don't have a certificate from school. I don't have anything. And then they took away my name and they gave me a number, 64735. That's the reason when I was thinking about the title for my book, I titled it From a Name to a Number. It's a very dehumanizing when you don't have a first name or last name, you just have a number. So this is very briefly because I understand you have some questions for me, and I'm willing to answer the questions.
And we really appreciate you taking the time today to spend with us and tell us your story and to help us with our project. And
I appreciate what you are doing. I think it is important that people should recognize the sacrifice of veterans.
well, when you were publishing your book, it must have been very uneasy and difficult for you to relive all those memories that you included in your book. What was that like for you?
It was very difficult emotionally and practically also because, as I said, I never had a chance to go to a school and study the English language. And then, this happened so many years ago, over 60 years ago. There are many episodes that I do not remember anymore. But I tried my best. The most important memories that I still have, I put them down in writing because, as I mentioned before, I felt it's my moral obligation to put it down for future generations.
What did you miss most when you were taken to those camps?
I miss my family. And remember, I was very young. I was 15 and a half years old when I was taken to the Blecha, my first camp. There were about 3,000 inmates. I was one of among the youngest. And the conditions in those camps were hard to describe. By the way, I didn't mention this before. When they took away my brother, we didn't know where to. Because when they deported somebody, there was no contact. They couldn't call, they couldn't write. But when I arrived in that camp in 1942, my brother was there. And I couldn't recognize him. I couldn't recognize my own brother. I didn't see him for 1 year. He deteriorated to such an extent that he aged 10 years in 1 year. And he was very concerned. He was pleased that we are going to be together, but on the other hand, he was very concerned, how will I be able to endure those terrible conditions in those camps? 24 people were housed in a room like this, 8 by 10. There were bunks, one on top of the other. There were no mattresses, no pillows, no bed sheets. They gave us 2 slices of bread in the morning, and the bread was made out mostly of sawdust. It wouldn't be edible to any person who had a normal life. And in the evening, coming back from work, we got a watery soup, which was very diluted. You're lucky to find a potato or whatever. People die constantly on starvation, and to die on starvation is a terrible way to die. So I had a very tough time, and I was altogether for 3 years in 5 different camps. So as you said, what did I miss most is my family and the comfortable, relatively comfortable life that I had at home. I couldn't go to school, I couldn't see the parents. And in the last camp that I was Wallenburg, I couldn't see a child, I couldn't see a woman, I couldn't see a mirror, my own face. I couldn't write because there was nothing to write with or to write on. I couldn't shake a hand, I couldn't touch anybody, nobody touched me. I had eyes the way you have eyes, I couldn't read, there was nothing to read. I couldn't see a smiling face. All I did see was horror. I had ears, like you have ears. I couldn't listen to the sound of music, to a kind word. All I could hear is cursing me, scolding me, and telling me, you are inferior. On what basis, I don't know.